Okay, hi. So today we're going to talk about the 15 books I DNF'd in 2022. So first off, I'm posting this very early. I'm not really being optimistic that I won't DNF something in December, but there's just so many like end of year things going on BookTube. I just kind of wanted to chat through these now. And then if I DNF anything in December, we'll talk about it next year. Let's just talk about my DNFing books mentality. I actually have like a whole video about this, but the TLDR is that I don't really like to keep reading a book I know I'm not going to enjoy, and that I'm not intrigued by. So sometimes I'll finish a book that I'm just so about, and sometimes a book that I end up DNFing, if I got to the end of it, I probably would have been so about. But pushing through books that I'm not, like, there's not enough intrigue value for me to keep going will put me into reading slumps, so I don't do it. Because then I can just stop reading, not slog, and then move on to the next thing that could be a better read for me. So I DNF across all genres, and I started tracking later on how far I actually got into the book when I DNF'd it. I'm just going to go in chronological order of when I DNF'd them. So we're going to start off with a romance, which is Kissing Galileo by Penny Reid. This one, I was pretty early on in the book. The love interests hadn't really like gotten a feel for each other yet, and it's just that type of writing style in romance that's a little too casual, and I kind of hated the protagonist. So like in a romance, I have to like the protagonist at least a little bit, and I couldn't stand this one, so I DNF'd it. The next one is The Last Brother by Nathacha Appanah. This was translated, I believe, from the French. And I DNF'd this one probably at the 15% mark too. This had a child protagonist, and I do like books with child protagonists sometimes, but it depends on how it's written, because sometimes you could write a child protagonist from the perspective of like they're looking like you're in the moment, I guess, and they're acting and behaving like a child. This was kind of written in the present tense, I think, like in the present, but like they had hindsight. And that kind of wasn't really my thing. It also had like the boy in the striped pajamas types of vibes in like plotline, which I also just am not really that big of a fan of. So yeah, I just abandoned. Next one, A Student of History by Nina Revoyr. This is actually the only book I've ever gotten from one of the Goodreads giveaways that I actually won the giveaway, and then I end up not reading the book for years and then DNFing it. And it's about this like guy who goes to a university and like somehow gets this weird job working for this wealthy woman, and then gets like introduced into that life. And for that, and like there's supposed to be intrigue, but I never really felt the intrigue. And it just felt like a plot that could have been done better in a different hands. And yeah, I didn't really like the writing, and I was honestly just very bored. So that one I also abandoned. Okay, so the next one, I will DNF a book literally at any point. And with The Death and Life of Great American Cities by Jane Jacobs, I DNF'd this at like 80%. So I was very far into the read. This is a nonfiction that was written in like the 50s or 60s about how to like city building and like kind of philosophizing like how to create a city and what makes a city like lively. So it was interesting where it was very academic, and it read very much like an academic text. The words weren't challenging to read, but the sentences kind of compounded on each other in a way that was kind of challenging. But it kind of came down to like I felt like I got everything I wanted out of the book at that point. Like I got like kind of a baseline of like, first off, I guess it's old, so it's a bit dated, and so like I think the foundational elements of the book were still like can still be used and like are helpful for today, but I just wasn't that interested in the final chapters, or it was the final part of the book, and like the things that she was talking about. I was rereading over and over again because the sentences were complex in nature, and eventually I just decided I got what I wanted from it, and I was done with the book. I was happy to the point at which I read it to, and it was just like time to like part ways. The next one is a classic. It is The Price of Salt by Patricia Highsmith. So this is like a lesbian classic. And it's about this woman who, she's younger, she meets an older woman, and I guess that they start to have some sort of like love affair. Like your protagonist is dating a man at the time, and like the older woman she meets is divorced and has a kid. I got to the 38% mark, so like not a whole bunch had happened at that point. Like I believe they eventually go on a road trip. I didn't get there. Again, the writing style didn't do it to me. I just couldn't give a shit about any of the characters. Like I need something to latch onto, and like the only thing I was latching onto was that I was reading this because it was a lesbian classic, and then I was like, I looked up Goodreads reviews, and I saw some Goodreads reviews that were like, yeah, here are some better lesbian classics to read, and so I was like, okay, I'll do one of those instead. I haven't actually gotten to them, but I have a whole list. And I have a video idea. So like maybe that'll happen in 2023. And the next one is another nonfiction, and that is Cleopatra by Stacy Schiff. I got to the 62% mark in this one, so I was pretty far in. This is all about Cleopatra and kind of like her being a queen. Her history, her family's history, her interactions with Rome, and is really trying to like compile all the known information about her into one text, because a lot of the things that are known about her are actually inaccurate. And so like I think that this is probably a good book for people who are interested in that. I don't like nonfiction that's like a compilation of facts, which sounds weird, but like I want there to be some sort of critical analysis and some sort of premise that I'm like that you're trying to get across to me. Like I want a thesis. And when it's just kind of like providing a historical oversight without much of a thesis involved, where they're extrapolating to come to a point or a conclusion, I get rather bored, and I get just like lost in the weeds, and I just question why I care. And so that was just kind of what happened for me with this book. I think that's like a me thing. Like I think a lot of people would like this and enjoy like just being iterated a lot of facts. And I did learn a lot of interesting things from this, but overall, it really just wasn't a satisfying read for me, so I DNF'd it. So the next one is Fates and Furies by Lauren Groff. I got 15% of the way into this. This is actually the second Lauren Groff book I DNF'd. I DNF'd Florida a few years ago when it came out, and I don't know, like Florida seems like it would have been more up my alley, and like I don't know why I didn't finish it. It might have just been because I wasn't feeling it at the time. Her writing is hard for me to like just get lost in. It's like I know this is like kind of used as an insult, but like when someone gets like a writing degree and like it's just so purple and fluid, like there's just so much in the language and their syntax is just so wild, and like I think some people really love that, and I don't know, I'm not one of those people, and I was kind of like getting into it a little bit, but then I was like, I don't want to read about these characters. Like it was about a man and a woman, and like they got married too fast, and like their relationship and like their past, I didn't care about anyone. They all seemed like they kind of sucked. And yeah, again, just like nothing to latch onto. There wasn't much of a plot, and so for me, I need the characters to be like written in a way that I find them like enticing or interesting, or like I want to understand their motivations, and I just truly didn't give a shit about these characters, so I DNF'd it. The next one was Dread Nation by Justine Ireland. So I DNF'd this at the 10% mark. I try to read YA, and I never like it. It's just, I am not the right audience. The writing style being very conversational doesn't really work for me. I guess, like, I don't know. I have a hard time, like, really kind of, like, trying to vocalize what doesn't work for me. Like, I know I'm not the intended audience, so, like, it's fine that YA doesn't work for me because I'm not a teenager. I read YA when I was a teenager, and I quite enjoyed it. The woe is me, like, the I'm the center of the universe, the, like the attitude of, like, your protagonists, just all of that being in a first-person narrative doesn't really work for me. I almost wonder if I would prefer YA that was third-person, because I just don't care about being in a teenager's head, like, at all. Like, I don't know. I just, like, I look back on being a teenager, and I'm like, yeah, she was an idiot. And so going and reading things for that section of life, I'm just like, yeah, doesn't do anything for me. Okay, I just want to be clear that this whole, like, rant had actually nothing to do with the book that I was meant to talk about. I was just generalizing to YA. Next one is Robopocalypse by Darnielle H. Wilson. I DNF'd this at the 33% mark, and this is also the second DNF I've had with this author. I tried Amped. I tried Amped last year and also DNF'd that. Again, this is just like a thing where the author is just not for me. It's very Blake Crouch-esque in terms of writing style and the portrayal of female characters. I would say that when it comes to the science, this seems a little bit more science-y. The author does have a PhD in robotics, so I would expect it to be a little bit more sciencey, but it's that, like, thriller action type book that always to me feels like it was made to be a movie, and is just plot with, like, little character work. That's not my favorite, so I DNF'd this. And then the next one was Swimming Home by Deborah Levy. I DNF'd this, I think, at like the 10% mark. I didn't write it down. And this was like about a group of people who like are in a remote part of a country at a house that they rented, and then there's like a random girl who like also booked it at the same time, but like also knows one of the guys who is there because he's an author, and like I'm guessing like I'm sure there seemed to have been something that was going to happen between them. Like there was things that you kind of knew were occurring. Like there were flash forwards, I guess. Yeah, I was just bored. I didn't care about the plot. I didn't care about the characters. Everyone acted like, it was kind of like, it felt like the author kind of like picked like one weird quirk for every character, and none of them felt real to me, so DNF. Okay, the next one was Wolf in White Van by John Darnielle. So I had picked this book up because someone in my real life recommended this book, but I had no idea at the time if our reading tastes aligned, and I learned while reading this that our reading tastes don't align. It was about this guy who suffered some sort of accident and is left handicapped in some way, and I'm always kind of like sensitive to that type of thing, like how that's going to be treated. And then the writing was just a little weird, and I just very quickly realized like this wasn't the book for me, so I DNF'd it. Okay, the next one is The Elegance of the Hedgehog by Muriel. Barbery. I DNF'd this at 12%. Okay, so this had multiple characters that you were kind of jumping between, and you were following a teenage character who's supposed to be like a prodigy, and also like her whole thing at the beginning is that she is going to kill herself. I kind of just generally refuse to read books that use suicide as like a plot device, or in a way where the character that is considering suicide is kind of like, I don't know, it almost feels like it's making fun of it to me. Like there's no real like show, at least to the point I got to, of like actual depression or like struggle. It's just like, oh, X isn't going my way, I'm gonna off myself. And yeah, I just really don't like that. Like, I've known people to that have been lost to suicide, and it's not really something people do on a whim, at least from my understanding, and it's not something that it is something people struggle with for a long time, and yeah, I don't really like that. So I really avoid that at all costs, and it's just something that if I immediately see in a book, I'm going to put down because I just... Okay, I just want to rephrase what I had said here. I don't think that it is something that should be taken lightly. I think that suicide and the feelings and the emotions that and the weight, the heaviness that come along with that are not really something to be trivialized, and that is how I feel when I read it in such a way where it doesn't feel like connected to the character's actual mental health and state of mind. The next one is The Murmur of Bees by Sofia Segovia. This is translated from the Spanish, and it's about this character who, like this young boy, I'm noticing I'm DNFing a lot of things with the younger protagonists and stuff. There's this young boy who has like an affinity with bees, but there was something wrong with him, or he was found in a really strange way, and he was taken in by a family, and it's kind of giving like the historic background of the family and the time period it takes place during. Is it the Spanish influenza? I don't remember now. It was definitely during a pandemic. And I think that this is a book a lot of people would like. I was just listening to it and wasn't a super big fan of the structure and the bouncing back and forth between perspectives and timelines. Like, there were timelines I found more interesting than the others, and anytime we bounced to one I didn't care about, I would kind of just start to zone out. So I decided to just not finish this book, but I do think it's a good book that people would like. Okay, we only have 2 more to talk about, and the next one is probably like the most well-known one on my list, and it's The Godfather by Mario Puzo. I got like 60% into this. Oh man, this one was a ride. So I don't need to explain what The Godfather is about, and I actually have never seen the movie, so I was going to finish this book and then watch the movie because it's very iconic. The first thing is, it's just, I know it's a classic, I know it was written a while ago, but it was so sexist and racist. It was just like, it kept happening, right? It's like, okay, going into it, and you're like, all right, this is gonna be sexist and racist, and then they'd say something, and I'm like, oh God, yeah, So like, all the characters are men, women were dumb. Like, women have no autonomy, they can't make decisions, they do things wrong, they're allowed to be hit, yeah. So that was that. And it was also racist, like just sprinkling in just casual racism, like all over the board. I was trying to overlook those things, but the book itself was just not as interesting as I wanted it to be. Like, I just wanted a little bit more action. I feel like it's probably better as a movie because they got to cut out a bunch of stuff and they have to make it like interesting throughout. Like, you have to keep momentum. And I felt that this book would gain momentum and lose momentum and gain momentum and lose momentum. And then we would like go into a different scene and we would be seeing these other people doing something. And then we'd go back here. And the war was beginning and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, and I kept just falling asleep while listening to the audiobook. It was just putting me to bed. And I was like, okay, we're moving on now. We're not going to do this anymore. Okay, and then the last one is The Bird King by G. Willow Wilson. I DNF this at 53% in. This was a fantasy, an adult fantasy that read a little younger to me. So you had like two main characters and you're in this palace and it's kind of like a historic fantasy. It took place in Spain, I believe, in like this Muslim kingdom. And kingdom is probably not the right word. I can't think of what it was actually called in the book. And all around, like, they're waging war, and this like kingdom keeps getting or like this place keeps getting like enclosed in. So they're running out of defenses, and it you follow this girl who is like a sex slave, essentially, like a concubine to the king that had a different name. I don't remember what it was. And her gay best friend who like can make maps of things he hasn't seen and like create holes, and he can like make a map and change like the dimension of space. And then they very quickly leave the kingdom, and it's just their quest then to find something else, but also to leave something else. When you're doing like a quest novel, it can be a hard sell because you have this one thing that you're getting to, but you have to like build interesting things along the way, but they can't just all feel disparate. It kind of has to compound, and none of that was happening. And I didn't really like the characters. It's like that snotty, like, I know everything type of mentality for the protagonist, which you find a lot, like, not to generalize too much, but when I read YA, I find a lot of that in the female leads, which just kind of annoys me. Yeah, I was just bored. And it was like two characters for a lot of the plot. So you really have to find these characters interesting, and I just didn't. So that was my last DNF of the year. Let me know if you read any of these and if you are totally outraged by me DNFing them. And yeah, that is all I got for this video. So until next time, happy reading.